Axe from the Grave, a 6th level D&D adventure built for 5th edition, written by Chris Perkins. This adventure involves a recovery of a mandolin called the Golden Axe, which has been taken from the grave of a halfling by the name of Froderick Frody Dartwild by a couple of halflings who were paid by a tiefling who runs a conservatory for bards, or bards in training, and thus taken to the conservatory where fiendish things are happening. As you can see in this image here, there is a number of pieces of original artwork by Kai Carpenter. You can see someone at the conservatory recovering the mandolin and a chasme clinging to the roof of the conservatory's tower. Now, the adventure begins with the player characters, one point or another, encountering Froderick, or Frody, in the village of Toadhop. When they meet him, they hear about the his desire to return to his grave, as Froderick has become a zombie ever since the mandolin was stolen from him. We have some interesting description here. Some little bits on Toadhop itself, the cabin where you encounter him. Essentially, this adventure is a bard's quest involving, well, bards. Player characters are soon directed to a pair of halflings named Mackerel and Trout, who actually dug up the grave and stole the mandolin and were paid to do so. These halflings are commoners, they're not really a major threat. They're just a fairly good NPC encounter to get information. The players soon learn about the conservatory itself, run by the tiefling Scythian Skaldarang, who is a almost comedic threat as a tiefling, as you'll see by his image. The halflings also draw or create a small sandcastle in the shape of the conservatory to give the players an idea of what the location looks like. Players are then intended to plan a heist to recover the mandolin from the conservatory itself. Many of the adventures in Keys from the Golden Vault involve some sort of heist or planning some sort of heist, and many of them are unrelated to each other. There is a way of connecting them, although I don't think it's necessary. Most of them, like this adventure, can easily be placed in other campaigns, essentially piecemealed, and many of which fit perfectly in specific campaign settings. In this particular campaign, it would fit fairly well in any Ravenloft campaign, as it has sort of a dark theme to it. I placed it within my Curse of Strahd campaign, putting it on the southwest corner of Barovia, with Toadhop being on the borders of Barovia and the conservatory being there as well. As you go into the adventure more, you learn more information about Scythian and the conservatory itself, and some other individuals at the conservatory, including a number of the students who are more NPCs and innocent bystanders that have no part to play in the theft. One thing that's interesting about this adventure is it does tell you roughly where people might be at the conservatory, the students as well as the professors, which, depending on when the players choose to arrive and explore it. As you get further down here, you get the description of the conservatory itself and its features, which I like that they actually put the type of doors, the various, heights and the elevator in here, and little things like that that make the adventure easier to run. Some of the main threats in the adventure are the fact that there is a chasme lingering on the roof, although it's the buzzing of its wings kind of gives it away unless it's asleep, and several closets which can be found within the conservatory as well. The students, who are all quite young, some very young, are excellent NPCs, which could be used later as, say, followers, particularly if there's a bard in your company who might actually gain the students as just his assistants, or maybe an ensemble that follows him around after the adventure. There's also a couple of NPC servants that are just commoners who work at the conservatory who are not really a threat and don't really understand what's been happening. As you go further into the adventure, the players are clearly going to confront Scythian about the location of the Golden Axe. One way or another, Scythian is the main threat here, but also his incubus ally, Joster, I believe that's Joster, are the main threats within the conservatory itself. As you can see by the map here, including the DM's map, it is a really a 3-level or 4-level, small keep. There are some secret doors. The 4th level would be the roof level, where the chasme is lingering. It's a flat roof with sort of a overlapping windows that look down into part of the conservatory itself. Much of the conservatory, though, is large open spaces and some small rooms. Because of this, and because Scythian and his incubus ally are the real main threat, once they are encountered in the adventure at the conservatory, and either an encounter takes place or they are somehow subdued by other means, that is roughly, I'd say, about a third of the adventure. The players will likely spend about a third of the adventure interacting with the various NPCs, including Froderick, Mackerel, and Trout, and as well as the innocent people, the bardlings, and the commoners at the conservatory, and exploring the conservatory itself. The last third really would end up being dealing with the chasme, as well as the closets that are lingering within the conservatory. As a result, this isn't a very long adventure. Most DMs can run this adventure in about 4 to 6 hours. I probably ran it in about that time, and it went as well, about as well as you would expect. My player characters, in our case, picked up the quest, went here, broke open the doors, barged in, demanded to find Scythian, and they went right to the point and then began raiding the entire place. But they didn't attack any of the NPCs. It was pretty obvious early on that the NPCs were not a threat, like, the bardlings and all that. And they explored the place and encountered some fiends, fought the chasme. The adventure is pretty simple in its approach there, and I don't know if the players would go off on the tangent and try to put up a big rouge or something in this particular adventure, but you never know with a different group. As you go further in here, you get the descriptions of the different chambers. I like that it has nice descriptions. I will note as well, this is another image by Kai Carpenter, which is a very nice image of the incubus Joster Marit and the closets and other such things. This is a fairly nice illustration. I come from an illustration background, so I can see some little things in the background about this that make it well done. As we go further in here, you see some of the more interesting chambers, students' chambers, the very bathrooms. There's a lot of nice detail here that Chris Perkins put into the adventure. You see the mandolin itself, the golden axe, created by Conceptopolis. Go further in to the adventure. You get the conclusion, and you get the rather comical image created by Kai Carpenter again of Scythian Skalderain, who is let's say a very amusing professor at best, with his brilliantly blue skin and his fanciful vestments. And then we get to the very, very tail end here. Now, the good part about this adventure is it is an interesting bard-themed adventure, and many groups do have bards. Bards are not necessarily the threat here. I mean, Skalderain, I can raise his stats here, is actually a bard, so he's a fun bard threat. And as you explore more of the manor, or the conservatory, you get a nice little exploration adventure, and it fits well, like I said, with Ravenloft or any sort of Borderlands out in the wilderness setting. The bad about it is Scythian is more of a predictable villain. Players realize really quickly that he's some sort of threat, and a confrontation will probably quickly happen. Now, most of the conservatory you'll note, by the way, is kind of the bad for the adventure is it's mostly empty. It just involves a lot of exploration. Once he is dealt with, the players are likely just going to encounter the Chasme, and as a result, the adventure concludes rather quickly. Overall, I would describe this as a 4-star adventure. But I would suggest DMs run it, especially if you're looking for a one-shot adventure that might fit Ravenloft or just anywhere on the road in the middle of your campaign.